Welcome to today's episode of Financial Fluency. Today I have the lovely Nicole Wipp with me. Nicole runs several businesses and has a whole lot going on in her life. And Nicole, I'm going to let you explain because I want to make sure we get this right.
All right. So I am a multipreneur, I guess, and this is just one of the things that I love to do. But my main business is my law firm, which is the Family and Aging Law Center. And I am an elder law attorney that works in both the asset protection and estate planning side of elder law. Mm-hmm. I also have Wipp Enterprises, which is my sort of business and personal development type of business. And so in that, my main program right now is a program called Innate Impact, where I help people really figure out how to best maximize their own time, their own personal best energy, and their own personal best way of working so that they can really be powerful in their businesses. And not work as many hours. I also, in the context of that, have begun doing corporate consulting because that has been something that has translated very well. So I do corporate consulting on those principles as well.
And you also have the Smart Planning 101 podcast, right?
Oh, yes, exactly. And so the Smart Planning 101 podcast is an adjunct to the elder law side of my business, which, Smart Planning 101 is about financial and legal planning for the future.
Okay. And this is very close to my heart personally, because the way I got into working with women financially was working with other autism moms. And the more I expanded and explored, there are a lot of us who are in this sandwich situation of having aging parents and having children. Some of us also have children who have extra needs. So there's a lot of planning needs for a whole lot of us right now. I think those of us who are in sort of the middle of our lives, having young children, also have baby boomer parents who not only are getting older, but are also living much longer than people used to. So the idea of how long are they going to need care, how much care, what kind of care, and how we all manage that is just, I think a lot of us don't know exactly what we have to plan for right now.
Yeah, and it can be so overwhelming. I think that that's part of the biggest problem is, especially if somebody like you, Jen, that has autistic children and the demands as a mother that takes on you. And then you're also a businesswoman and the demands that takes on you. And then you have aging parents and there's so many demands and all of us feel so overwhelmed sometimes. But the thing about doing smart planning is that the idea and the goal of it is to reduce the overwhelm. Because once you have good planning in place, that's a nice big check mark that you can put on the column of success to, say, I'm ready to, go on to the next thing. And yet, if you don't have that check mark, a lot of things can fall apart and fall apart very nastily. So that's the sort of the idea behind smart planning. And what I do as a lawyer is just really understanding that getting that done, even though it feels overwhelming, can actually be one of the best things you could do for yourself.
Mm-hmm. I know the day that I went and finally signed the special needs trust for my kids, and we made sure our estate planning funnels into that so that their Medicaid protection is protected and all of that, I did feel this huge weight come off my shoulders because up until that point, just the fact that we own a home, much less businesses, meant that if our assets went directly to my kids, the way my daughter's medical needs are, it could get used up very quickly without Medicaid. She could be disqualified for Medicaid. And even if everything was liquidated in the span of her lifetime, she would definitely run out of money. So it was this whole oh gosh, any amount of money could be a problem for her. And of course, we also want money there to provide for her in the future. So
exactly.
I still feel like I have a lot of work to do just because I know I need to acquire more to make sure, not only my lifespan, but my kids' lifespan. So I probably will want to talk to you outside of this episode as well. But yeah, I think making the steps to know that at least the structures are in place, even if I don't have everything funded the way I want it to, helped.
Right. And that's so great that you took that step. I mean, I admire you because I deal with a lot of parents with special needs children as well. And that, like I was saying about the overwhelm and feeling so depleted, and you know this, and any parent that has special needs children knows, I mean, being a caregiver, whether it's for children with needs or if it's for parents with needs, is one of the hardest things that we can do as human beings. And it's emotionally and physically taxing. And it really leaves very little room for mental energy. And so very few people actually do it. So I give you so much credit for actually taking that step. But the things that you pointed out are so important. I mean, people really don't realize the legal ramifications of not doing it and impacting somebody's ability to receive benefits, impacting their ability to not outlive their money. I mean, these are really important things. And it's important at the age that you're dealing with your children. And then it's just as important for our parents and then ourselves.
Actually, I was thinking about that when you were talking about how taxing it is. My husband and I are coming up to 10 years right now from when I was first pregnant with my daughter. And my health issues started during pregnancy. I had very, very difficult high-risk pregnancies and then having special needs kids on top of it. And the time when everyone offers the most help was when my kids were diagnosed early on, when we hadn't had things figured out yet. But both my kids also have sleep disorders, as well as my husband. So now we're kind of 10 years into going through all this, and he and I have both had a lot of health issues in the last 2 years. And I know from talking to you before this episode that you've recently had some pretty serious health issues yourself, and just making plans for how to handle moments when you yourself, as the caregiver to either your parents or your kids, are unable to earn income. I would love it if you would talk about that some, because no one expects that to happen.
Right. I mean, this is such a weird but important topic because you're right. Like as a caregiver, and I see what you said, like you and your husband's health is being impacted maybe in very subtle ways that you aren't even realizing, but it's cumulative, right? Mm-hmm. And I see this all the time. I'm going to talk about what you asked me to, but I want to make this point before I forget it. I see it all the time with people where the caregiver, and this is very, very common with elderly parents, the caregiving parent dies before the parent that's quote unquote sick. And it's because the stress and toll of being a caregiver is so great that that person actually becomes much more health impacted than the person that's quote unquote and sick, and they die first. It happens all the time. And so understand that if you're a caregiver, you have to take care of yourself. And so and yet or that you can have unexpected health consequences yourself. And that's what happened to me, not because I was a caregiver. Now this is a totally different topic, but I last year in the early 2015 ended up in the hospital, and it was completely unexpected. I mean, if you ever saw me, and if anybody that's listening to this, you can hear me, but you can't necessarily see me. But if you ever saw me, I look like one of the healthiest people alive. And if you saw me on the day-to-day basis, people always are commenting, oh my gosh, you have so much energy. I can't believe you do all this stuff. I appear to be extremely healthy. But the hidden issue is that I have a very rare and deadly disease, and it's called lymphangioliomyomatosis. It's like this 26-letter word. And it's a very rare disease that affects primarily women of childbearing age. And I discovered I had this disease after having sort of a year of underlying, not really severe symptoms. I got to tell you, I mean, I was just like coughing a lot, and I was tired, and I couldn't sleep well, and like just sort of random things that didn't add up to a lung disease, which is what my disease is. But what happened was that my body just finally said enough is enough, and I got to a crisis point, and I ended up in the hospital, and I was there for 30 days. And in that 30 days, I had 4 surgeries. I was given like over 50 medications. I saw 20 to 30 doctors. I was in 2 different hospitals, actually. I mean, it was on and on and on. So in the course of that 30 days, I was fighting for my life. And I had a 4-year-old at home and a husband. And, nobody was expecting this to happen. My husband was tearing his hair out. He thought he was going to lose his wife. I have this business that, businesses that are going on. I have all this stuff going on. He can't manage my businesses and manage our house and manage our son and manage and take care of me. I mean, he can't do all of that, right? It was just so overwhelming. You want to talk about overwhelming? It was overwhelming, and it was completely unexpected. I mean, I'm in my early 40s. And nobody, expects when you're otherwise healthy in your early 40s to suddenly be completely taken out like that. And yet it happens all the time. And like with me, I got a rare disease diagnosis. But Jen, you might know this, but your listeners probably don't. Rare disease might be rare individually, but rare disease is not rare. Actually, 1 in 10 Americans has a rare disease.
And my daughter's one of them, my oldest.
Yeah, so there we go. So here's 2 people on one call that have people in their lives that have rare disease. So rare disease isn't rare, but that's irrelevant. I mean, just being sick and having accidents and having crisis things happen is not rare, okay? And so what really struck home for me in the course of that, and it was horrible. I'm talking about it now and it seems like it's not a big deal, but I can't tell you enough, Jen, how devastating this was. I mean, it literally felt like I was struck down, and my son, I have these pictures of him in the hospital where my husband would, they came every day, and my little 4-year-old adorable child is like curled up in the hospital bed with me, and I have all these tubes and needles and everything sticking in me, and this little sweet innocent child is sitting there. And as a mother, I just was like, I cannot die. This child needs me. Like that's all. I mean, that's all you can think of as a mother is, oh my God, this cannot happen. And yet you have to face the reality that it might happen. And that was my reality in that time frame. And it was not easy, but it was what it was. And so I'm telling this to your listeners. I want everybody to hear me because I'm a lawyer that this is what I do for a living, and look at, like, it even happened to me, right? It can literally happen to anyone. And so we want to plan for our children, right? Mm-hmm. We want to plan for our parents, but you have to also care for yourself. It's essential, because sometimes when you're the mom, especially, or you're the woman and you're doing everything for everybody else, if you're the domino that falls, guess what? They all start come tumbling down too. So when we're trying to take care of ourselves and be mindful of our financial future and the financial future of our families, you have to remember that the care of yourself is essential, because you could be the domino that knocks every other domino down, right?
Mm-hmm. And in thinking about this, I realize, as someone who doesn't work in a traditional 9-to-5 kind of job, I actually don't have disability insurance on myself right now. And that's what this conversation is making me think of. If I did work for a corporation, I would possibly have some disability coverage. What do you advise people about disability coverage for themselves?
Well, that's interesting. You need to just decide, and you have to look at your situation and say, if I had an unexpected accident or illness, would my family be able to continue without my income? Mm-hmm. Or can, like for you and myself, I'm a business owner. Will my business be able to survive without my active day-to-day involvement in it? And one of the best things that a person that owns a business can do is set up their business so that it can run without you. This is a massive undertaking, right? Mm-hmm. Some of you that might be listening to this might be like, oh my God, I can't even see how I could possibly do that. But there are things that you can do, and this is something that you should have in your mind. And I'll make sure that you have the link to this, Jen, and I didn't discuss this with you before, but I actually have a video and a free white paper on this exact topic that can be downloaded by your audience. So I'll make sure that you have the links for that, because this is something that you can really start taking in and taking control of. And yes, it's not going to be overnight if you own a business, but you can set those things into place. Because what happened for me, just to give you an illustration, is I actually had a lot of those structures in place prior to my getting sick, not because I expected to get sick, but because I was engaging in some good business practices, partly because I had made a ton of mistakes in my past businesses. I am a serial entrepreneur, and I have done the stupidest things in business that have been the most self-defeating and impossibly, like I said, stupid things. I have done those things. And so I had finally learned my lesson, and I had been setting things up. And thank God I did. Because what happened was, when I got sick, was that my law firm was able to run without me, not for just that 30 days, but ultimately for 90 days. Because even after, imagine 30 days in the hospital and 4 surgeries and being diagnosed with a rare disease, you're not magically better the minute you get discharged from the hospital. Even though I was fairly healthy before I went in, I had a long recovery period. After that, I did not really work in my business for another 60 days. So a full 90 days of not working to my full capacity. And my business was able to go on without me. So actually, I was getting paid, and my business was continuing even without my presence. But that was because I had set up things properly. So my answer to your question is disability insurance might be the answer, or having good structures in place to ensure business continuation is another way, or a mixture of both of them.
A past podcast episode guest, her name's Sylvie McCracken, who she specializes in passive income, and she was talking about her ebooks that she's created, and she thinks of those as her insurance for her family because it's completely passive to her. She has Facebook ads or whatever kind of ads set up that funnel people, and then her whole system is automated so she doesn't touch it, and it continues to generate these sales. And I remember when she was on the podcast thinking, oh, wow, that's a great idea. And we have all the Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week, set up the fulfillment. That never quite worked for me, just because the idea of selling some random product I don't care about, I was never inspired to try to start a business like that. But I think so many of us who do have sort of service-based business where we interact with people pretty directly, it's hard to think of how that would work. So if someone is listening to this and is thinking, okay, I am a consultant, I'm a coach, I help people with their health and wellness, or with maybe even websites or something like that, how would you suggest they start going about making their business so that it could run without them? How do you do that?
So this is so great, because I don't know if you intended on this, Jen, but it really does lead right into what my other business is, which is I have a program in Wipp Enterprises, which is my development business and my consulting business, called Innate Impact. And this program was literally conceived and created out of that event happening to me, where I got sick and had all these problems. Because a lot of people said to me, how did you do this, Nicole? Right? I mean, it's common, right? And I have a very wide business acquaintance, and people were just, nobody thought my business was going to survive. Nobody did, and it did. And I'm just as strong as I ever was, and my business is actually better. I work actually way less than I did before, and I make the same amount of money. But it was because in getting these structures in place, part of what I did, which was so powerful for me, and this is to answer your question, was I really had been concentrating on how do I work the best? How do I portray myself to the world in the best way? How do I make my business be the most authentic version of itself so that it attracts people to me? And how can I create these structures in a way that works for me personally, Nicole Wipp? And, because we are not cookie cutter people. One size does not fit all. And yet a lot of what's out there today in terms of programs and things like that is meant to provide sort of these cookie cutter solutions for us, but they don't really work. I mean, you've probably been like so many of us, buying all these programs and trying all these different things. but a lot of times, almost always, they just don't quite work for you for a variety of reasons. And my opinion is that one of the reasons is because you aren't 100% clear on what A, makes you the person that people need to work with, and B, what your best way of getting things done is. And when you are clear on that, then you can set things up in a way that revolves all around you. And then if you need to put that missing piece of you back in, you'll know exactly how to do that. And that wasn't what Innate Impact was sort of conceived and designed to do, was to answer that question of what all these people were saying to me is, how did you do that? Because I feel like when you understand exactly what your specific contribution needs to be to your business and what you can get rid of in a way that's going to make the business work the best, when you can understand what you can do to give value to others that only you can do in your own way, when you really understand that, then you can create the structures around it that best serve you and what you have to offer to the world. And so that was what the whole Innate Impact program was conceived and designed to do. And since I'm doing that, what I've found is that people have really, the people that have gone through the program have really felt empowered to do things that they didn't really see that they could do before. Because it's when you have this profound understanding of yourself, it makes things a lot easier.
Can you give an example of that from yourself? Like, what's something that you were able to change that had a big impact and that makes it easier for the way that you work?
Yeah, so, one of the things, we live in a society, for example, where, being the kind of person that starts something and finishes what they start, right, is so prized and valued, right? And when you come up through a traditional education program, I mean, you got to look at me as somebody that's been very successful in traditional education, okay? I mean, I'm a lawyer, so that means I got through high school, college, and law school. Oh, and by the way, 2 bar exams. So that's, I did 2 different bar exams because I'm licensed to practice in 2 different states. And, that means that you have to have a good traditional method of operation, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. But that doesn't work for everybody. Not everybody's a good traditional student. And even myself, I'm a good traditional student. So I'm going to tell everybody, yeah, I'm really good at following through. I finish everything I start. I'm always going to, do all this stuff. But what I've discovered is that I'm really, really, really good at getting things started and providing the energy and momentum to make things happen. But once they get started, I have no real interest in making sure that it goes all the way through. I'm really good at providing the energy for momentum to get started, but to complete, not so much. And this could be seen as a weakness, right, Jen? Mm-hmm. I mean, if I told people this in a general sense, and if I was telling this to an employer, that might be considered as a weakness, but it's really not. What it is that's my unique strength, is empowering things to make them happen. And then I hire to finish. I hire the finisher. And that's great because you know what? The people that rely on me to get things done don't need me to be the finisher. Mm-hmm. They just need to make sure that it's finished. And when I understood that, and I powerfully understood that, I was able to go out and be very focused about what I needed to make happen in order to, who I needed, the type of person that I needed to make that happen for me, to make it happen for my clients, exactly the type of person that needed to be, and get them into place and work well with how I was going to be able to work well with them. When I really understood that that's exactly what I need, mm-hmm. I made that happen. And then that's what happened. And that's why my business survived. That's why my income has quadrupled since I started this process personally. And the amount of time I spend in my business has gone down to 5 days a month as opposed to 80 hours a week.
Mm-hmm. I think I might be a similar type of person because I love the idea phase, idea generating, brainstorming, coming up with ideas and starting things. And I kind of fizzle at the end too. And often my VAs end up picking things up. Like, okay, can you make that into a PDF, make it look nice and slap an ending on it? That kind of thing. Like,
Right. And but it's so powerful to really be 100% clear on that and say, okay, because then guess what? Jen, never need to do that again. Because guess what? That's not where my best value lies. But then, like for example, my assistant, but then on the other hand, here I am, entrepreneur, I need an assistant that's going to have a very, very, very strong ability to follow through. But we know from the traditional education system and the way that our thing is that everybody's going to tell you that they have a strong ability to follow through. You have to have systems and structures in place to understand whether that person is telling you is really true, because they might not even realize it themselves. I mean, listen, I would have told people, yeah, I can follow through, and anybody would have believed me because I have a law degree and I passed 2 bar exams, and why wouldn't you believe that I have the capability of doing that? I do have the capability of doing that, but my energy is not there. And so if you want to rely on me to do that time and time again, it's not going to happen. So when I hire somebody, I need to know that you need to have that ability to understand, okay, this is actually a person that is going to be able to do that. And they have to have that self-knowledge as well. And then you put them into place. So it's like, the building blocks of yourself and your team, so to speak. But even if you're not an entrepreneur, I've had tons of people that have gone through this program that aren't entrepreneurs, but they've learned how it's part about managing your energy and understanding where your energy is going to be best spent. And this can be very freeing to people.
And as you were talking about the kind of person who you need to finish things, my best friend from college, we were roommates afterwards. We were in bands together. She does events planning. For a long time, she was a wedding coordinator in LA. Now she does big events in Philadelphia. They're actually doing part of the DNC. She is an amazing finisher. She is there. She makes sure the tables, the linens, the shapes, the settings, she has that mind to make things go perfectly. And yeah, it just made me think of why we've been friends for so long and how well we've done so many projects together over the years. I was just like, oh yeah, like I love the big idea, and she's very supportive of that, but then she would take it over and finish things for me.
Right. So she's probably not really the idea person, right? That's probably not her strength.
And with the events, people bring the events, but then she does all of the perfect detail. She gets, down to the penny, what things will cost, the perfect, way to set your cheeses and your like the food stuff, she knows. Yeah. And
so, like look at yourself, Jen, like you might be capable of doing that, but your energy is not in that place. And if you had to do it time and time and time again, would you be able to be continuously successful? And I would suspect that the answer is if you had enough willpower and desire, maybe, but it would grind on you.
I could probably do it sufficiently,
Yeah,
like,
but not excellently, right?
Yeah.
Like she can.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's okay.
She has a flair for it. People love her. Like brides and mother-in-laws, like send her gifts. And
and that's wonderful. Like, and so that's the thing is like, and she has so much satisfaction in that. It gives her, I'm sure it gives her such a great feeling to know like that's the thing. And so that's part of it too, is innate impact to me. It's about really being able to be like, yes, I am great. And being able to say it to yourself and feel good about it, being able to say it to other people and feel good about it, and not being obnoxious. Listen, it's not about being obnoxious, but yeah, I am great at what I do and I am worth what you pay me. Especially women, we have a hard time being paid what we're worth, right? Really being able to stand in that place and make that statement and be powerful about it is a wonderful thing to do for yourself. And so that was what that was all about for me. It was evolving that into that place for people, because when I was able to do that for myself, it profoundly changed my life. I mean, I went from like having this struggling law firm and being a completely miserable lawyer to having a very dynamic law firm that people love and feeling really great about myself as a lawyer, never apologizing for the fees that I command, and also being able to do other new businesses that I feel very passionate about, but never sacrificing the quality of any. What better thing could be done for myself and for the people that I love and for my staff and everybody else than to know that and be able to provide that. So, that's what it's about. It's about being powerful in a positive way.
That sounds amazing. So if people are interested in your Innate Impact program, how do they find out more?
They can just go to innateimpact.com, actually.
Innateimpact.com. Okay, great. And we'll put that link in the show notes along with the links to your Smart Planning 101 podcast, Family and Aging Law Center, and the Nicole Wipp Healthy Success Strategist website. Is that all the places?
Yeah, we'll leave it at that today because there's probably lots of other places that I can be found, but those are the easiest ways to find me.
Okay, fantastic. And I want to find out more about the Innate Impact because I think sometimes we're not entirely aware of what our best way to work is. Because when you were talking about people doing programs, I couldn't help thinking about when I did GTD, the Get Things Done. I've tried a ton of productivity and financial books. If you look on my audible.com and my Kindle list, those are sort of the two areas that I read in a lot. I like fiction too, but those are where I focus a lot because I feel like I've struggled at different times in my life with both things. And I think you're right. I think there are so many people who try to tell us how to be productive and how to manage our money, and yet our lives are so complex, especially when we have, these different family, aging parents, special needs kids or non-special needs kids. No one's financial situation looks exactly the same. No one's day looks exactly the same. No one's time looks exactly the same. So we do need to figure out how to make it work for us.
Well, and not only that, Jen, you're right, but not only that, but the way that you do your best work is not the same as the next person, which is not the same as the next person. And so all of us have different energy for different types of things to get it done. And so sometimes, and I know that but what I'm saying is, like, you ever been at work and you're like, what is wrong with that idiot? Why did they do it that way? Like, oh my gosh, what are they thinking? And that person's probably thinking the same thing about you. And it's because the way that you get things done is totally different. It may not be right or wrong. It's just that you can't understand why somebody would do it that way. They can't understand why you would do it your way. It's because the way each of us do things is different. And when you understand your way, you can actually become so much more productive.
And have you ever experienced it where someone, because of the way we're educated and because of the jobs we have, has no idea yet what the best way is for them?
Oh, nobody does.
Yeah.
This actually, I'll tell you this. I mean, listen, you're a smart woman. I'm a highly educated woman. I'm totally into these things. Nobody understands the best way of how they do it. Nobody does. And the reason is because we are in this conventional wisdom box. We are in a conventional educational society box. Everybody knows this. I mean, if you're listening to this, like the way we're all educated, it's a box, but we don't fit in the box. We are not all cookie cutter people. And
it was created to do jobs that don't exist anymore.
It was created for an industrial age, line workers. Everybody's got to fit into a mold, but that is no longer the knowledge economy. We are in a whole different world. And so to compete in the knowledge economy, we have to get rid of some of these chains around our mind about how things should be and accept ourselves the way we are. But if you've grown up in today's world, you have no idea how you are because you have no context to discover that. And so that's really what this is about. And by the way, I just want to say, I'm not talking like I've made all of this up myself. I use science-based programs to deliver the Innate Impact program to other people, and I combine them in a way that powerfully works for other people. So I'm not saying that my thing is wholly based on like my own research and knowledge. It's based on research and knowledge about these things that have been done by other people that are way smarter than me. I've just encapsulated it in a program.
Well, that sounds good. I'm really interested in how it works. I would like to know how I work best. I mean, I definitely have moments of flow where I can try to think back like, okay, what time of day was I working on that? What did I eat that day? What was my mindset? How are these different things? But it is hard to pinpoint what brings out the very best work in us.
And that's what this is literally all about. So, and it's such a great feeling when you actually figure it out and you can actually do it.
Awesome. Okay, well, we're going to leave it on that tantalizing note. If you are interested in what Nicole is talking about, we'll leave a link so you can get to Innate Impact and find out more, find out the tools and research behind it and everything. And thank you so much for being on the show. I had a great time talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Jen. I appreciate it.
I do feel like that for women starting their own businesses, that's often one of the hardest things.
Yeah, I think so. And it's interesting because for a long time, we only had men examples to follow.